For 70 years, IBM never laid off a single worker. Not during recessions, not during product failures, not even during the Great Depression. If your job disappeared, they retrained you, moved you, found you something else. IBM was the company where you walked in at 22 and walked out at 65 with a gold watch and a pension. In 1993, they cut 60,000 people, 1 out of every 6 employees gone in a single year. The company said it had no choice. The PC revolution had made IBM's old business irrelevant and they needed to change or die. Most of the people they cut were over 40. Right now, companies are laying people off and calling it AI transformation. A Harvard Business Review study from January 2026 found that most of these layoffs aren't based on what AI can actually do, they're based on what AI might do someday. The technology hasn't replaced the workers yet. The workers are already gone. 30 years ago, the excuse was the PC. Now it's AI. The workers are different. The sentence is the same. In 1985, IBM was the most valuable company in America. 405,000 employees worldwide. If your office had a computer, it was probably an IBM. They called it Big Blue, and for decades, Big Blue was untouchable. What made IBM different wasn't the technology, it was the promise. IBM had a full employment policy. Once you were in for life. The company handbook said it plainly. When other companies let people go, IBM retrains, reassigns, and relocates. In return, you gave the company everything. People moved their families across the country 5-6 times because IBM asked. Employees joked that IBM stood for "I've been moved." Charlie Mitchell started at IBM in 1977 at age 24. Her grandmother had worked there before her and wept on the day she had to retire, not because she was leaving, but because she loved the place that much. Mitchell's father spent 30 years there and used to sing the company anthem at home. Then the ground shifted. Personal computers started showing up everywhere in the 1980s, smaller, cheaper machines from Apple and Compaq that could do what IBM's room-sized mainframes used to do. IBM had built one of the first PCs themselves, but they were too slow to see where the market was going. By 1991, the company posted its first-ever annual loss, $2.8 billion. By 1992, another $5 billion gone. Headlines started asking whether IBM could survive. In April 1993, the board made a decision never made in IBM's 82-year history. They brought in an outsider. Louis Gerstner had never worked a single day in technology. He came from RJR Nabisco, a company that sold cookies and cigarettes. Before that, American Express and the consulting firm McKinsey. Within months, Gerstner did what no IBM leader had ever done. He cut 60,000 jobs. The company reported $8.1 billion in losses for 1993, the largest annual corporate loss in American history at that time, and said the layoffs would save $4 billion a year. The official explanation was clean: technology had changed. The mainframe era was over. IBM had to become leaner and faster or die. Gerstner was the surgeon the dying patient needed. That's how the story got recorded. 60,000 people were cut and the story made sense. The company was bleeding billions, the market had shifted, and someone had to stop the bleeding. When a company loses $8.1 billion in a single year, you don't argue with layoffs. You accept it the way you accept surgery. It's awful, but the patient was dying. That's the part everyone believed. The company was in crisis and this was the cost of survival. Except the patient recovered awfully fast. In 1994, 1 year after the largest corporate loss in American history, IBM posted $3 billion in profit. Not a small improvement, not breaking even. $3 billion in the black, an $11 billion swing in 12 months. The stock followed. It nearly doubled between 1993 and 1995. Wall Street loved it. Gerstner was being called the greatest turnaround CEO in corporate history. And that's where it gets strange. If IBM was genuinely dying, if the company was so far gone that cutting 60,000 people was the only way to keep the lights on, how do you go from $8.1 billion in losses to $3 billion in profit in a single year? Companies on the edge of death don't bounce back that fast. A patient who needs emergency surgery doesn't run a marathon the next morning. There are only two explanations. Either the surgery was one of the most miraculous operations in business history, or the patient was never as sick as everyone was told. IBM's own 1994 annual report gives a clue. It says the restructuring saved $4 billion a year. That's not revenue from new products. That's not money from entering new markets. That's the savings from cutting people, salaries, benefits, pensions, all gone from the books. If you fire enough of the most expensive people on your payroll, the spreadsheet heals itself, the company looks healthy, the stock goes up. The question is whether the company actually got better or whether it just got cheaper. IBM had been losing money since 1991. The decline didn't start in 1993, it had been building for years. And for all those years, IBM handled it the way it had always handled problems: retraining, reassigning, relocating. No layoffs. The company was shrinking from 407,000 employees in 1986 to 300,000 by the end of 1992, but it was doing it through buyouts, early retirement packages, and voluntary departures. Slowly, carefully, and without breaking the promise. Then Gerstner arrived, and within months, 60,000 people were gone. The natural reading of that is, the previous leaders were too weak to make the hard call, and the new guy had the courage to do what needed to be done. That's the story that gets told in every business school case study. The old guard couldn't pull the trigger, the outsider could. But think about why that might be true. The old IBM leaders had spent decades inside the company. They knew the people they'd be cutting. They'd worked beside them, promoted them, moved their families across the country together. Firing 60,000 people you've known for 20 years is a different thing than firing 60,000 names on a spreadsheet. Gerstner didn't know anyone. He came from a cookie and cigarette company. He had no history with IBM, no relationships, no memory of what those people had given. He saw headcount and cost because that's all an outsider can see. And the timing wasn't a coincidence. Gerstner was brought in at the exact moment Wall Street was demanding what it called decisive action. Investors didn't want incremental change. They wanted a signal, something dramatic enough to prove that the old IBM was dead and a new one was being built. A new CEO's first major move is never just a business decision. It's a message. It tells the market, I'm not like the last guy, I will do what he wouldn't. 60,000 layoffs is a loud message. The stock nearly doubled in 2 years. Wall Street applauded. Gerstner became a legend. The people who lost their jobs became a line item in a turnaround story. So the question that keeps coming back, was this the hard decision a dying company needed, or was it the opening performance of a new CEO who needed the audience to believe he was different? If IBM's layoffs were about technology, about adapting to the PC era, you'd expect the cuts to follow the skill gap. People who couldn't learn the new systems would go, regardless of age. That's not what happened. The majority of the 60,000 people cut in 1993 were over 40, not 3-year employees, 20-year veterans, 30-year veterans, people who had moved their families across the country because the company asked. They were also the most expensive people on the payroll. 2 decades of raises, seniority benefits, pensions approaching maturity. And 1993 was just the beginning. A ProPublica investigation in 2018 found that IBM had quietly pushed out more than 20,000 American workers age 40 and older in just 5 years. 60% of all U.S. job cuts during that period were workers over 40. Internal documents used the phrase correct seniority mix. Planning slides called for aggressive performance management to make room for younger hires. Recent college graduates were explicitly marked ineligible for layoffs. A 2006 internal paper referred to older employees as gray hairs and old heads. Some workers were told their skills were outdated and let go, then brought back weeks later as contractors, doing the exact same job for less money and no benefits. If the issue was technology, you'd cut by skill. If it was adaptability, you'd cut by performance. But the pattern wasn't skill and it wasn't performance. It was age. and age at IBM meant one thing above everything else: cost. Now connect all three pieces. Record profits the year after the layoffs, angle 1. A new outside CEO needing a dramatic first move for Wall Street, angle 2. And the people cut weren't the ones who couldn't adapt, they were the ones who cost the most, angle 3. Any one alone could be coincidence. All three together look less like a company surviving a technology shift and more like a company replacing its most expensive parts with cheaper ones and calling it innovation. It's like renovating a house. You tell everyone you're modernizing for a new era, but what got ripped out wasn't the outdated wiring. It was the hardwood, the copper, the hand-laid tile replaced with particle board and plastic. The house looks new, the appraisal goes up, the structure got weaker. History records it like this. IBM was dying, technology had changed, and a tough new CEO made the painful decision to save the company. 60,000 jobs lost, but the company survived. A necessary sacrifice. But that's not what we saw. We saw a company that posted $3 billion in profit the year after cutting 60,000 people. We saw an outside CEO who arrived at the exact moment Wall Street wanted blood and delivered it on his first day. And we saw that the people who were cut weren't the ones who couldn't keep up. They were the ones who had been there the longest and cost the most. Now it's 2026. Companies are cutting workers and calling it AI transformation. A Harvard Business Review study from January of this year surveyed over 1,000 executives and found that these layoffs aren't based on what AI can actually do, they're based on what AI might do someday. The technology hasn't replaced the workers are already gone. Technology changed, we had no choice. IBM said it in 1993, the companies laying people off right now are saying it word for word. So is this a new decision for a new era, or is it the oldest excuse in the book, just wearing a different name?